I was on, I think it was Match.com. I lived in the Northern Virginia area for a long time. There were a lot of military bases there. So a lot of the batches you got were military guys. I could just tell right away, something was funky. And I'm a poet too. So he would write me these, long poems. And I thought, that's a sonnet. I looked on Google and then right underneath it, Nigerian scammers using I was like, oh, the pictures he had on the website were from a military obituary site. He had taken pictures from a man who was killed in action. That infuriated me. I called Match. I called, the local police. I'm like, well, and there's nothing they can do. There is absolutely nothing they can do.
Welcome back to Just Lookin Out. I'm Kaylee Nitchie, your host. Now, if you think you've had some rough dates, today's guest makes your worst Tinder match look like a warm-up act. She has spent more than a decade in the digital dating trenches where profiles lie, men pose with fish for unknown reasons, and red flags come in bulk like they're on sale at Costco. She survived it all with humor, nerve, and just enough sanity left to write a book about it. So we can laugh, cringe, and learn the hard lessons without actually having to live them. So buckle up, lock your doors, check for catfish, and welcome the woman who has seen it all, survived it all, and somehow still believes in love. Catherine Berra, welcome to Just Lookin Out.
Oh, thanks. Nice being on their show. And I really look forward to this because that was a very interesting introduction. But yes, we have been through it all, haven't we?
Yes, when I was learning more about you, I realized that you and I have a lot of similarities and we've gone through some similar experiences. So I'm just excited to have you on, jump into them and hear from you, learn from you, and I'm sure our listeners are eager to do the same. So I'm just going to jump right in.
Sure.
We have to start with the title of your first book. These stories are true, I shit you not, a humorous look at online dating for the unsuspecting older humans. Tell me how you got to this title.
Well, as you can well imagine, just having these experiences, the reason I wrote the book is because a friend that was a coworker, she had the office next to me in DC when I worked there, and I'd come into the office and I'd tell her all these stories. And she would say, oh my God, Kathy, you have to write a book. And I said, I don't want anyone to know this happened to me. I was so mortified. But every time I would say it, it's like, these stories are true. I shit you not. I shit you not, this happened. Because nobody believes it. And so that just came to me.
I'm not making this up.
I am not making this up. And so when I wrote the book, of course I had to do the asterisks for Amazon and everything. But that's how I came up with it, because it's basically the line. You just cannot make it up. You can't make it up, and it's ridiculous. But it is funny. It is funny. And that's what I had to get my head around, because it's humorous but mortifying. So
mortifying is an interesting word, because I often get asked, like, why were you so okay openly sharing your story? And it's like, well, this happened to me. This is my life. And yeah, it might be humorous to you. And for all of those that are in committed marriages, that's awesome. And maybe you didn't meet your spouse on the online dating world, but it is the Wild West out here. And this happened to me, and here's my life, right? I mean, it's kind of like, this is what's going on in the world.
Exactly.
Your subtitle calls online dating a humorous look for the unsuspecting older human. At what point in those 10 years of ridiculous, confusing WTF dates did you realize, wait, this isn't just my love life. This is a cautionary comedy show for everyone, and I want to show it. Was there a memorable moment?
It was probably just my friend in LA. She was just so amazed by everything I had gone through. And I think it was the day when I had set up a date for lunch, and she was in the office next to me, and she had heard all the other stories. But this guy, I was getting ready to literally go out the door to meet him for lunch. And I got a text from him right before I left. And you wouldn't believe what it was. It's a chapter in my book. It was a dick pic. And it was like right before the date. And I was, what? Why would he do this? And he said, I just want you to know what you're getting for. And I of course, I canceled the lunch date, but I brought it into my friend and I said, "You're not going to believe it." She's
I
like,
am
"You have got to
horrified.
be," anyway. So it was kind of the impetus of me saying, "Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh." And then, of course, during COVID, she had all these stories that I had told her and I tried to block them, right? So during COVID, she said, "This is the perfect time to write that book." I have horses, so I was lucky I got to go out and ride my horse, but and be outside and all that, but everyone else was kind of locked down, and she just said, "This is
Mm.
the perfect time to do this." And then she sent me a list of dates that I forgot I even had. She said, "Remember this one? Remember this one?" I was like, "Oh my God, I forgot about that one." So anyway, she was
She was
really
like full on
my,
journaling them for you.
yeah. Well, she just thought it was so damn funny, and so that's why I ended up starting to write it, and then I put it together, and I worked with a online publishing group, and yeah, so it just turned into this crazy, crazy thing. And then about 2 weeks after I published it, she also said, "Do you ever hear of Book Talk on TikTok?" And I said, I heard about TikTok because my friends would all have me record them doing dumb dances during COVID. Everyone was
Uh-huh,
bored. And I
uh-huh.
thought, okay. But then I thought, oh, I'll look at that. And so I got on TikTok about 2.5 years ago to passively market my book. And one of the first videos I did, and you'll relate to this, it was about a chapter in my book about scammers. The guy tried to scam me. I caught it really fast, but that video has over 1 million views and about 20,000 comments, I think, from people. But then I just reposted it a week ago, that same video, 102,000 already. And it's just crazy because we all have dealt with something, either a friend or a relative or ourselves, in this dating conundrum, whatever it is, especially as an older person. You just think, oh, we're all mature, we're all going to behave well. And it's just kind of a shit show. But, and that's why I just have to keep a sense of humor about it. And then you think your stories are bad, and then you hear other people's stories.
I
Your
know.
story is crazy. And so that's, so it just kind of keeps going.
There's a sense of, though, like, that it happened to you, it happened to me, it happened to a lot of people listening, like, that makes you feel a little less alone,
Hmm.
because it is happening so much, and the way these scammers are operating, it's complex, and it's, like, hard to
Oh,
figure out
yes.
where we are in the story. Am I the main character? It's very difficult to decipher reality for what's from, like, what is
Sure.
actually true.
Right.
I would love to just, like, double click into what was your scam story that you talk about in the book.
Oh, sure. Um, well, just to back up a second, you had said you were just at on an AI podcast, and that's another scary thing that's happening right now. They're cloning voices, and so it's just bizarre. I've been hearing all sorts of weird things. So my scammer story was I was on, I think it was Match.com. I lived in the Northern Virginia area for a long time. I worked in D.C. for a U.S. ambassador, the whole D.C. thing, but there were a lot of military bases there. So a lot of the batches you got were military guys, and it was just a typical thing. And this guy had probably 15 pictures on the website. And so then of course, I did the dumb thing, which is I went off Match to talk to him on something, I can't even remember what it was. Um, and I could just tell right away. It was just funky, something was funky. And I'm a poet too. So he would write me these, long poems. And I thought, that's a sonnet. I looked on Google and it, came up as a sonnet. I, copied and pasted. And then right underneath it, Nigerian scammers using I was like, oh, that little son of a gun. So anyway, I started playing the game, and the post I made was basically when he said to me, he was in Northern Virginia, and then all of a sudden, like the week later, he was in Afghanistan. I was like, wait, what? And he said, yeah, we just finished a really difficult training and I'm going to take a hot bath. And that was what my video was. And I'm thinking, well, who the hell takes a hot bath in Afghanistan? Anyway, so that was
What kind of
that.
a soldier are you?
Right. What kind of a man are you? But I then I started thinking, well, wait a minute. Where'd the pictures come from? And I don't remember how I figured it out, but the pictures he had on the website were from a military obituary site. He had taken pictures from a man who was killed in action. That infuriated me. So I called Match. I called, the local police. I'm like, well, and there's nothing they can do. There is absolutely nothing they can do. And that's why I love what you're doing with the fuzzy, because that is amazing. But again, it was infuriating because it's just not right that they took his pictures. And so I was completely fooled, of course, by the pictures. But then at one point, I just texted or whatever I was on. I don't even remember, honestly. But I said, how's Nigeria? And then I never heard back from him, So,
Well, of course.
yeah.
It makes me so upset because I actually dated somebody when I was in college that was actually killed in
Oh,
Afghanistan.
my
He was a
gosh.
Navy SEAL. And that community has just, they still take care of me. This was 15 years ago. And one of the SEALs actually became a congressman in
Wow.
Washington, D.C., who's helping me currently with some of the legislation initiatives that I'm trying to do on the scamming. So if he heard that story of somebody literally posing
Yep.
as a soldier that had actually physically died in war and then was claiming their identity, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
Congressman Morgan would go ballistic.
I
These are the
know.
Luttrell brothers, and they would not like that. So you hit on something very interesting. It seems to be that there's these very heavily targeted groups,
Mm-hmm.
military being one of them, people posing as police officers or firemen, and then AI videos around politicians and saying, nefarious or evil things that don't necessarily support that particular congressperson's political stance. I'm dealing with, an instance in D.C. where this actually happened to one of the congresswomen out of Indiana, and it's getting really scary.
It
It's like,
is.
if you can clone someone's identity visually and their voice in less than 30 seconds and then quickly go and pretend to be that person,
Mm-hmm.
how does anybody know that that is actually you?
Right.
And when we start to think about, moving that into the dating world, we're moving into an offline interaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're putting ourselves out there physically and our safety's compromised. You see that with violence and bullying. LGBTQ communities are getting targeted. And it's just really terrible that the dating apps haven't committed or haven't done a better job of initiating precedent to make sure that daters like you and I that are on the apps are, in fact, in a safer position.
Right. And I agree with that. And speaking of the military, what you just said, so that video I mentioned that has the 1,000,000 views, the comments, I actually almost did a sequel to the book based on the comments just from people
Mm-hmm.
about scammers. And I still might do that, but it's literally tens of thousands of comments. Oh, yes, he was a military guy on a boat in the ocean, and they were on a deployment, and their child was with the grandparents because the wife was killed in a tragic accident, and I need iTunes cards because I can't continue talking to you until I. So it's a funny script, but it's also, I agree with you 100%. When I called the app to tell them that this
Uh-huh.
man had stolen these pictures, oh, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do because basically they get a Visa card, a $50 Visa card, and they sign up for a month, and you can't track them. So it's a game. It's a game that they play, and it's a very focused, nefarious sort of thing. And thank God I didn't get, of course I figured it out, but a friend of mine, her sister was bilked out of about $5,000. Of course, what's fascinating
Ugh.
to me also is the human condition where you have never met a person, you've never seen them really in person, you've talked to them multiple times and you believe who they are, and then you send them money. I mean, I just watched The Tinder Swindler. I hadn't
Oh my
watched it
gosh.
before. And I'm thinking, why would although they make it so you're afraid. You're thinking there's some horrible thing that's going to happen or that they're in dire straits and they need help. So, of course, as women, maybe, it's happened to men too. I have comments from men as well that got,
Uh-huh.
scammed or whatever for tens of thousands of dollars. So we hear it all the
Yeah,
time.
the financial fraud is just getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Last week, I heard the most dramatic, staggering statistic that I've heard in a really long time, which is that Google predicts in 2026 that an estimated 20 trillion with a T, $20 trillion will be lost to online financial scams, making it the third largest
Wow.
economy in the entire world. United States, China, scams. And like that to me is just so mind-boggling to even wrap your head around. And everything goes back to making sure or trying our best to ensure that someone is who they say they are, because
Right.
there are no limitations to people falsely advertising themselves online. There are no rules, policies, laws against these people doing that, which is terrifying.
Exactly.
And then the ease of use, like you just said, you go get a Visa card for $50, you're on Match for 30 days. Why isn't Match mandating somebody,
Right.
making sure that they're proving their identity? Why are they allowing this? And, I feel like what happened to you and I, like we've taken with a grain of salt, and I just heard this amazing quote, when life gives you lemons, make a sass company. That's exactly what I did. You wrote a book and a poem and have this just amazing outlook on what happened to you. But unfortunately, there's really some painful things that have transpired from online scams or
I
fraud.
agree.
And they can come in the form of physical violence, rape, sexual assault. And the dating apps know that these things are happening, and the trends only continue to get worse, year over year. So I'm just like pleading, will someone please prioritize this within the apps? Because if people don't start mandating that people prove that the others are who they claim to be, we're going to continue to get into this mess. And technology is only getting more advanced and complex,
Right.
which just
Well,
further makes everything else more difficult.
I agree. And you mentioned something earlier about cloning the voice. And I had a friend whose grandmother got a call. They were gone on Facebook, cloned the grandchild's voice, called the grandmother in assisted living with that cloned voice, told her
No.
they was in jail, needed money. And this is what's scary, because these people, the elderly people are not technologically savvy, because
Totally.
it wasn't part of their world, and so they're so much more vulnerable. And I think that's what's really scary. And there's just so many. The AI is a fascinating thing. I just watched something on a site called Hypernatural or something, where you can clone your own voice and create posts that way. And I'm thinking, I'm not so sure I want to do that. But
Sure.
it's everything's changing, and it is, legislation is necessary. And I applaud you for making those moves, because it can be funny, and my book is funny. But gosh darn, reading those comments from these
Uh,
people that lost $30,000. We've seen it all the time on TV, 250,000 on the Tinder swindler lady. And um, it's very disturbing. So, but yeah, I did try to keep a sense of humor in the book, just because you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. But, I applaud you for doing that, though, because it's definitely something that needs to occur at some point, just to protect people from these scammers. But trillions of dollars. I had not heard that. We're the third largest economy in the world. That's scary.
I'll have to
That's
send
scary.
you the Forbes article where I saw it. I had to like kind of take a moment. And I'm like, how many commas are even in a trillion? I don't even know if I could
That's
write the
true.
number, like how many
I don't even
zeros?
know.
So it's just getting out of hand. I
Yeah.
want to kind of go back to your book.
Okay.
I'm sure that and I kind of went on Amazon and I saw that you have hundreds of reviews, and which has led to so many TikTok followers. You said that you just got millions of views on a single post. So every audience, I'm sure, has that story that they're running up to you and saying, "Oh my gosh, this happened to me," after reading your book or whatnot. And what's the one scene in your book that always people corner you about or ask you about, and they're like, "Oh my God, is that really real?" I would just love you to like kind of expand a little bit more on what happened.
Well, it's kind of that's the mortifying chapter. It was just about a man I went out with that he wouldn't stop talking. He was a man that had obviously had the surgery to lose weight, so the whole thing was weird. Um, But at the end of the date, he just kept telling me story after story after story about these previous dates he had, and
Wait, this is date one. He's telling you about dates he's been on
oh
with
yeah,
after
oh yes,
post
oh
GI
yes,
surgery.
oh yes,
Oh
and
my
he's
no.
eating like
Oh
a,
no no.
you know, just I mean, and I in the chapter I talk about the fact that I'm sitting there going, oh, I don't know, and he started talking about immediately he was in a boot, you know, and in Colorado everyone's an Uber athlete here. So you see people in these
Mm-hmm.
boots, you know, and their injuries and all this stuff. But he started to tell me about this, some kind of ulcer he had in his foot. And
Ew.
anyway, I mean, it
Please
was
don't
just
tell
like,
me. Did he show
I know.
you? Did he physically
He did
take his
not
boot
show
off
me,
to show you?
but
Oh
the
my God.
last, so he
I would have
kept
lost it.
telling me story after story about these dates and this and that. And the last story he told me was about a girl he went out with that got she had 10 rum and cokes at dinner. I said, well, after 3, wouldn't you have kind of stopped her? You know. Anyway,
Seriously.
she actually asked him to pick her up on their first date, which he did. Then they get to the restaurant. Then she has all these drinks. And then he says, I just decided, you know, I was done. I was going to get her a cab. So I called her a cab. And then he went to the restroom, asked the waiter for the check, and he came back to the table, and the check wasn't there. And he said to the waiter, you know, can I have a check? I had asked for my check, and the man said, well, I will give you your check as soon as she puts back everything that she just took off the table and put in her purse, right? So she had been stealing, you know. And then because she was so drunk, he had to escort her outside. And this is mortifying. I'm telling you, this is a mortifying story. He escorted her outside waiting for the cab, and they got in his truck before the cab got there because she was so drunk she couldn't stand up, apparently. And he said he helped her in the car, went around the side, and the way he described it to me is it's mortifying. Again, this is a professional man. He was a vice president at a major telecom company in Colorado. And he said I got in the car, and what I didn't realize is either she had taken her panties off when she was standing there, or she already had them off, and she started trying to make out with me, and then she tried to insert the stick shift. Oh, I'm not kidding you. This is my first date with this man, and I literally put my fork down, and I stood up. I got my purse, and I said, I'm done. I am just done. He's like, what? Is that too, you know? I mean, this was post a story about his cat getting kicked by a burglar, and I mean, it's just like it's a chapter. You have to read it because it's like, what? I left. I got my car. I called my brother because you know, he's my, you know, what the hell are you know? And I just said, I don't think I'm meant for this world,
Uh-huh.
because I said, what? Who
Right.
talks like? And he's like, oh, he calls him Jack to the asses or something like my brother does. But and I was crying, you know, and I was like, this is horrific, you know. So that was probably the stick shift story. Oh, and then he told me, yeah, the next day I had to go. Or when I was on my way home, I stopped at 7-Eleven to get some bleach and some paper towels to clean it up. I was like, this man's in his 50s. You know, I was like, holy cow. That's a chapter
Oh.
right there. But then, you know, speaking of that, gone on dates after I've written the book, and I've told men that I've written the book. And I remember it was a chiropractor I was talking to for quite a while to go, and we were going to go out, and he calls me and he says, you know, I think I don't want to go out because I don't want to be the next chapter in your next book. And I was like, well, then don't be an ass, you know.
Yeah,
But
like
anyway,
be
yeah.
a gentleman and you won't make it into the book.
Well,
It's a pretty it's a pretty easy
so
rule for you to follow.
again, you can't believe that story. It's true.
No.
It is true, and no one, you know. But that's what the one people are like. Are you kidding me? I said, no, I'm
Yeah.
not kidding you. I shit you not. That's why I wrote the book, you know. But anyway, so yeah, that's the one that's mortifying for me to tell, but it's
Uh-huh.
true. And so you also say, what is this? What's going on? Like, why are people? Why did he think he should tell me that story? Why,
Sure.
you know? So.
I love that you actually just were like, enough. Enough is enough. I'm not giving you another piece of my energy or
Mm-hmm.
time. Even I'm not surrounding myself with this energy. I'm gone. I
Mm-hmm.
actually just had a memory of I've done something similar. This is like when I was first on dating apps. So I think this is maybe one of my first dates after my divorce. I'm very novice, right? And this guy, I'm wearing my cross necklace and he is drinking, and he looks at me and he's like, what's your POV on genocide? And I was very taken aback because naturally I would just assume our POV is universally just we hate it and it's awful and terrible, right? And so I kind of was like, excuse me? And he was like, well, the biggest form of mass genocide is Christianity. And that's when I put my glass of wine down and I said, you know what? This isn't never going to work. I respect my time way too much, and I left too. So this is a message for the girls out there that
Yes.
are in a situation where you just know it's not going anywhere. You're so far misaligned on your values and what you believe to be important in life. Just stop it. You can do so
Mhm.
politely.
Right.
I'm sure you didn't make a big scene about it. I wasn't going to either. Quite frankly, I was a little terrified of the guy. But you can leave. Like, don't
Sure.
think you have to stick around. And when they ask for dinner and you don't want dinner, say no. No, thank
Yes.
you.
Yep. Yep. And, my book also talks about, I'm an older person, but it does talk about younger people too, because, I have stories in there about, there's a 27-year-old girl who was dating a guy for 2 years. And at dinner one night, she said, well, kind of was fizzling out and I wasn't really sure. But he said during the dinner, oh, by the way, I want to go back to my husband. And she said, what? She had no idea he was bi. She had no idea he was married. She had no idea he was separated. She had no idea. And so she just was furious. So I think that's what I'm saying with the human condition. What are we
Sure.
doing? I talk about my friend who literally met her husband. She's older than me, and she met her husband, gosh, 20 something years ago, but 30 years ago, maybe, um, through a personal ad in a newspaper. So that back in the day, before all this happened, all this online stuff. Now I grew up in the '80s, so there was video dating. I do have a couple of videos on my TikTok about that because it's hysterical. But
Oh my gosh. Is it like
I like
MTV
walks on the
style?
beach. Oh my God, it's so funny. And these guys, I don't like a chunky girl. I like, all that kind of, it's so funny. But she said, yeah, I was on the train in DC going home and I was reading a magazine. There was this personal ad. And so that means she had to take it home, write a letter, put it in an envelope, put a
Sure.
stamp, put it in the mail, wait for the response. So I think that's one of the other things I think is completely missing in dating is the art of anticipation. We are just swipe, 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 swipe. Nope, nope, nope,
Totally.
And I think it's just a sad state of affairs. I mean, I really do think social media is a great thing. It has lots of benefits. But as we've talked about the scammers, we've talked about the swiping and this autonomous ghosting stuff. Now,
Hmm.
granted, you think that the young people think that only happens to them. 2 weeks ago, my cousin convinced me to go back on Facebook dating, I think it was called. Yeah, Facebook dating.
Okay. How's
S
Facebook dating? I've
Oh,
never tried that.
well, again, it's like, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go
I'm
try
getting back out there.
again.
Sure.
I'm not a quitter. And, so I got on a date with a man. We spent 5 hours at a restaurant. It hit it off like crazy. The next day, it was pouring rain here. I'm in Durango. We had this 2 days of 7 inches of rain in 2 days. It was crazy. So we didn't do anything Saturday. So Sunday, we said, let's have coffee. And I texted him. I said, I'm going to see my horses and I'll meet you in town if you want, at this little local restaurant. Didn't hear from him. And then at 4:30 that day, oh, sorry, I just got really busy. And I never heard from him again. So I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. It's 5 hours of my life that I spent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I don't understand either. It's like I'm a financial independent person. I have tons of things I'm doing. I have time. If I want to spend time, I will make time. So if I make time, my time is valuable and so is yours. And so that's the inconsideration I don't understand of just people like, So again, it's quite an autonomous sort of world now with regard to dating, but it's all ages. So again, here I am trying again, and it's like, wow, just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the question amongst like my friend group, and I'm in my late 30s, so I'm probably the middle category of you
Mm-hmm.
and of the girl you were just mentioning. But it's like, oh, are you back? Are you on the apps? And it's like we all know the apps means the dating apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like no. And then 6 months later, you're like, okay, well, I guess I'll give it another shot. Oh, I'm going to be positive this time and I'm going to have a good attitude. And this is it. This is my chance
Yeah.
to really find like a quality individual. And then it's like, wah, wah.
Wah,
And
wah, wah, wah.
yeah,
Debbie
it's
Downer
just,
music for sure. Yeah.
it is. It's not good. So
Well, but I have
I,
to say, my book, there's chapters that men told me. So there's a chapter about, the one of the guys I dated. We dated, and then it just kind of, wasn't anything there. So we stopped. And then about 6 months later, he popped up on my Match thing again. And so we connected and was, let's just go to lunch, So then he told me a story, and it's in the book, about a woman he started dating. Now, granted, I think she was a pharmacist, and she had 3 kids by 3 different dads. She'd been married 3, and I was like, red flag, red flag. Anyway, so, but he's telling me the story, and he said, oh, yeah, and I thought we were monogamous. We dated for 4 or so months. I thought we were doing really well. We went on to a conference together, and, I came home, and one day I knew she was off on Friday, so I thought, I'm going to go to her house and surprise her. He said he showed up with flowers at her front door. Her car was in the driveway. She opens the door in a cheerleading outfit. And I said, what? He said,
What?
a cheerleading outfit. She was in there having a threesome with 2 of her ex-husbands. You cannot make it up. And I said, a cheerleading outfit? And he said, well, part of one anyway. And I said, well, did they invite you in? And he said, no. And so he said, then I went to the doctor the next day. I know. So
were the dudes dressed like football players?
He didn't see the dudes. He did not see the dudes. So
what?
again,
When you said the cheerleader thing, I thought you were going to say she was a minor, and I would. I mean, that would have taken it to a complete.
No. No,
like she was getting ready for actual cheerleading
woman.
practice,
No. Yeah.
But this is just, I cannot. And it's, I think, just to double down, so the name of my company is Safe Her Incorporated because once started as a very much I'm going to help keep women safe, and I'm going to find a tool that can protect us all and help us navigate this crazy world of dating, soon became, after tons of research and just understanding that this online deception world spans so many different age groups, like you mentioned. It's across all genders, ethnicities. And I was like, I have to change the name of my technology because this is not gender specific. This happens to everyone. And everyone's always like, well, why fuzzy? And it's really easy answer. It's it's a very non-emotional word that means if something's fuzzy, it needs more information. And that's what we're providing, right?
Right.
And it's not supposed to be scary because like your friend that met on the OG dating app, the newspaper, beautiful things can happen from putting yourself out there and wanting to find somebody and have a true meaningful connection. But we're not asking enough questions for people to actually say, hey, is this you? And if so, would you mind just doing this quick identity verification for me so that I'm in a safer position and I'll do the same for you?
Right. Perfect. I think it's so necessary. And for everyone, you're right. Every age range, everyone.
Yeah, I have a question for you. Since you've been on the apps a long time, as a woman, I feel like this is, we're all going to be like, oh, obviously we need fuzzy. My thing about the dudes, do you think that marketing it to the dudes to say, hey, if you're actually a decent guy, this is a green flag, this is a leg up for you, is the way to go? Or what do you think would resonate with the male audiences just because of your
I think that would, honestly.
Yeah.
But and I think, too, if they don't do it, if they don't want to do it, then you question them, right? Because why wouldn't they? That's the whole point. And I think there's you get on there and I'm married, but I'm looking, just like that Ashley Madison or whatever the heck that was, I think that it would be a great way to market it because that would tell you these people are serious. They're not just on there to, bide their time or to screw with people or, steal money or whatever. But I think that would be a great way because that would really, I think, weed out a lot of not so great guys. And again, there's just so many different types of people looking for different types of things. But the people that are serious, I think that would be a real great benefit. And I think the men would. They would. Because I think a lot of men have been scammed. I really do.
Yeah, it needs to be something that we're both asking each other for just so, hey, I'm not up to, I don't have any bad intent either. And it's interesting, you just said the guys that are married. And it's kind of like, well, with fuzzy, we're not in the business of judging. If you're verifying your identity and you're willing and you are married and it
Right.
says that you're married on there, we're okay with that. I mean, there are people that are, that are socially okay with those kinds of modern relationships,
Right.
and that's fine. Just don't lie about who you are and what you're claiming to be. Don't be married but say that you're single looking for a really, loving relationship, because that puts people like you and I, like, we're at such a disservice because we're
Right.
actually looking for that.
Right. And I think too, when they say they're single, I've also had situations where they say they're single, but they're not divorced yet.
Mm.
They've been separated for 2 or 3 years because of the legalities of everything that's going on, the kerfuffling of with their divorce or whatever. And so they say they're single, but they're really not quite yet single. And so is that an issue? Maybe for some people, maybe not. But I think if you ask if they're married and they don't want to answer the question, then that also gives you an answer. So I think that's really a great idea. I think it's brilliant, actually. It's brilliant. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely, from a labor of heartache, and just it happened to me, and I'm like, this is
Hmm.
not good enough. We should be
Hmm.
doing a lot more, and I think I have an idea of how this could work in a way that feels just very, like, human and
Right.
normal. I always tell my team, I'm like, we're bringing safety's sexy, guys. We're bringing it back.
That's right.
Like,
Bringing sexy back. Well, I think
yeah,
too, gosh, partnering with some of these apps. I mean, it would be very interesting for me if you approached them and it was just part of the app because,
So
that,
I did at
oh,
first, and I kind of was not
poop.
prioritized.
Wow.
Yeah. So now I will say that was some time ago. So it's
Hmm.
probably time to, go back. Certainly the technology is advanced both on the B2B and B2C side, but I was getting such a definitive no, or we're not interested, that I was just kind of like, well, we're going to really have to position ourselves as the third party here, because people don't trust the apps anyway.
Hmm.
This verification system needs to come from just something that's outside of the world of the app, so that it can build human trust and let people rely on it.
Right. Right. And I think it could be spread across multiple, I mean, not just dating apps, of course. I mean, it could be just phenomenal assistance to a lot of different industries and, yeah, save a lot of fraud from a lot of fraud. So good luck. I
Thank
mean,
you.
I'm curious to see how this all pans out because I think it's a yes. I say yes.
I love that, and I love that endorsement. Thank you. I want to pivot here. So we talked a lot about your book,
Mm-hmm.
um, but you have also published a book of poems, should I
Yes.
say,
Yeah.
that is a almost stark contrast from the witty humor that was in the book of the dating stories, and the poems are extremely emotionally charged and deep. They're very beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
very much enjoyed reading them. I'm curious, what writing persona do you most identify with? Is it the humor, the fun, the kind of self-deprecating, or is it the emotional, deep,
Well,
thoughtful
that's a good
poem writer?
question. Well, that book, I've been writing poetry since I was in about 6th grade. So some of those poems that were in that book were actually written when I was like 12 and 13 years old. But um, a lot of the deeper, sadder poems in there, I had a man that I was madly in love with, and he passed away from cancer,
Mm.
with cancer. And so a lot of those are in there that are about him and just the depths of the deep, deep sadness that I felt, but also just about the human condition, I think also just, but I resonate with both really. I mean, I think we're just multifaceted creatures. And now just speaking of that, on both sides of that, on my third book is basically, I'm working on it. It's about
Oh,
the
very cool.
irony and humor in death because during the last 5 years, I've lost my father and my mother.
Mm.
They were
Oh,
married 50
Kathy.
years and they got divorced. So had been divorced 10 years when they both started declining. But the book started out just because it was an event. You asked me about the events in the comedy book, but the event that really was the impetus of this starting me writing this book was my dad was ill. We had 2 days to put him into hospice. We were kind of contemplating what was going on, and So it was tragic and sad and horrible and devastating. But then I was in the hospital taking shifts with my brother, and I went to the restroom in the hospital, and I was coming back, and I hear this music, and I would look in this room, and this lady's playing the harp. I'm like, what the heck? And she said, oh, I'm a volunteer, and I go around on this floor.
Oh, that's
I said,
nice.
oh, how sweet. So she says, do you want me to come to your room? And I said, well, I'll have to ask my dad. Now, my dad was an old Italian guy, and funny, sardonic sort of sense of humor. And I went in, he's laying there, and he's dying. He's literally, like 2 weeks later, he was gone. But I pulled on his toe, he's laying in the bed, and I said, Dad, there's a lady down the hall playing the harp. Do you want her to come? She's a volunteer. And he looks at me, opens his eyes. Granted, he's just this old, funny Italian guy. He looks at me, he says, honey, I'm going to be hearing the goddamn harpist soon enough. I don't want to hear the harpist, And so it was, I was
He's like, I'm not at the gates yet, okay? I'm not at the gates.
But it was like, oh my, and I was like, this is sad and happy. And so it's that kind of mix of who we are as humans. It's like we have to go through all that stuff all the time. And so I started writing this book. And right now it's, the working title is Die Laughing, but it's just the way life is. It's tragic and sad and horrible, but it's so freaking funny. And if we don't laugh about it and use levity to get through, that's my motto in life. You have to just look at the bright side or look at the funny part of it, because it's just crazy. Life is just a crazy adventure. And so, yeah, my dad that was the comment that got me thinking about it. And then, the things that happened, before, during, after both of my parents, my mother asking me after my dad died, well, before they cremated him, did they check his teeth? And I said, Mom, what are you talking about? Oh, is there any gold in there? I said, Mom, what the? She said, well, this lady on TV, they cremated the grandpa and he had enough gold in his mouth and they went on a trip to Europe. And I was like, so this is the stuff I'm talking about. Like
she's
what?
on like the United app, like trying to book you guys flights.
I was like, did you get the gold out of the, so anyway, but just stuff like that. So the poetry book is pretty, emotional and all that. But I think that's just one side of me, and I think we all have those sides. And I have another poetry book I'm working on also. So it's just, I think too, I got to a point in my life where, my horses, I never had a horse till I was 50 years old. And I was in a grad program doing animals and human health, and my dog died. Like I was going to do animal assisted therapy, and my dog died. I'm like, well, now what do? I have 2 years to do research. I ended up at a rescue barn where this horse wouldn't leave me alone. And this old horse whisperer guy, oh, I'll teach you about that horse. I'm like, I don't even know how to put a halter. I don't know anything. Now 4 months later, I adopted this little horse, and I now ride out in the countryside for 3 hours at a time by myself. And then a year and a half ago, at a barn here in Durango, a man brought in 5 babies. They were all 5 months old, going to slaughter. And I just started sitting with this little colt. And he gave me the horse. Now I have 2 horses, but he's now 2.5. And I just literally sat on him in a saddle. I learned how to be a horse trainer. So life is just a crazy series of amazing events and phases. And I think that's one thing about the dating. I think we all do the same thing. We can all relate to all these things, right? And I just think we have to keep trying different things. But yeah, the life is an adventure, and that's all I can say. I mean, and dating is definitely an adventure. So, and again, I don't know if I want to put much more effort into it at this point, but the book sure resonates with so many people, and I'm enjoying that. I still enjoy it. I don't enjoy the scammer stories, but just hearing people's experiences and that we can all relate to, what we're going through. So yeah.
I love that also everyone's sharing with you about their experience. And it's like you've almost created a platform on TikTok for people to say, this is super shitty, but this is what I went through. And then it's almost this, just others that can feel empathy towards that situation, because it can feel isolating and vulnerable. And I'm curious, how did TikTok become like your preferred platform or channel?
I started out on there just with the book situation, trying to do
Mhm.
the books, but then I just started engaging with people in my age range, and it just started becoming a conversation of, wow, what, and I can relate to that, and it's we would make each other laugh, and I think that's also something when you're over the age of 50 and you've been through all this stuff, right? So I always say too, my generation is literally the last generation that didn't have social media. We are the first generation of parents that had to deal with social media. So my son is 32. And I remember when he was in fifth grade, I got him a little flip phone. Thought he was
Mm.
so cool, and then all of a sudden the smartphones came. And then we were literally the first generation of parents our children were indoctrinated without our knowledge because of the things that were popping up on the phones that we
Sure.
didn't have control. So yeah, I think it's just a very interesting adventure in all regards. But TikTok is it's fun for me, but it's also, I did a live yesterday, I think it was, and I just get on there and I talk, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? What do we got going on? Just keep supporting each other because we are connected, but we're also so disconnected. And I
Huh.
think it's just a great way to reach other people. And just my message is always, you're not alone in whatever you're going through. Either it's dating or taking care of aging parents, or your kids can't afford, life right now because the economy is so crazy. But we all can relate to that. And I think because we are from that generation that didn't have all of this social media, we just have a different perspective of life and how it was. And, they didn't give us a guide to say, oh, here's how you raise a child with social
Huh.
media, because,
Uh-huh.
we had a completely different experience. And so, but TikTok I think you have to be careful on everything, right? But I enjoy engaging with people in my age range. So,
What is one of the single most memorable stories that you've heard from your audiences on TikTok that have been scammed that you just really couldn't believe it yourself?
oh, yeah, there was a woman who responded to the TikTok, the first one I did that got the 1,000,000 views. Um, and she just said, I just can't believe it happened to me. I think it was $30,000.
Ugh.
And she said, I just believed him. I just believed him. And again, it's people that are wanting the human connection. And, it's hard. Sometimes it's just hard for people either working or they're older or they're isolated, and that's who they prey on. And that's why I thank you for what you're doing, because um, I feel horrible. I mean, what do you do? And, and then, family members have gotten on there and said, my mother, actually, one of my best friends, her father-in-law, um, was in an assisted living facility and got, had the computer access and all that, but he had a Russian girlfriend, which we probably
Oh,
can well figure out it wasn't a Russian girl, but
sure.
tens of thousands of dollars. So, when they went to look at his estate to, do the financial, and they're like, where's all this money going? And he was sending it to this person or whatever. So I think the one with the $30,000, that was probably a low amount compared to many other stories. But yeah, she goes, I'm so embarrassed and I'm just so mortified because I believed this person, and then you send the money, and then of course they just block you, and then you're out
Hmm.
your money, so, and that's a lot of people's savings.
Oh, it's just so terrible. You've talked a lot about the human condition and how we're so multifaceted, and humor, yet emotion and connectivity and community is like what, threads us all together. And I've just really appreciated your stance on that because you're right. This world is just really crazy what we've entered into. It was interesting hearing your perspective as like the first generation of parents having to govern their kids that are getting on social media. Well, I
Mhm,
was that kid, right?
mhm.
I was in college, Facebook came out, and I remember my mom, she couldn't get on Facebook because at that point you had to have a college email
Oh,
address.
sure,
And
right.
I remember she made a very interesting comment that will forever stick with me. This is probably back in like 2005 or 6, and she said, "I can't parent you online right now." because she didn't have any visibility. She literally couldn't even be on the platform.
Right.
And I've kind of taken that mentality with me as I approach my business, because I want to make sure that I can offer something to parents to make sure that our kids are protected
Right.
online. My kid, my daughter's 7. God forbid some creepy AI video is generated of her and she ends up on some weird
Yep.
website. I want to know about it so I can be
Yes.
the governor of her online self, if you will, and get
Right.
it taken down.
Right. Well, I read your Inc. article, and it just said you can track users' own images and bios. That's what's fascinating, because you are so right about that. When my friends post with their grandkids or I'm like, don't do that. Please don't do that. Because there's just so many creepy people out there. We know about it all. And, a lot of people have heard about it, but my gosh, it's just so true. And, again, it angers me. It angers me to think about it. And I don't know why I just started thinking about it most recently we are the first parents group that really had no clue what our kids were seeing. And what, I told my friend, oh, I'm going to she said, oh, this is when her daughter was quite a bit younger. She said, I'm going to just let her get on Instagram. I said, have you opened Instagram just to see what pops up just randomly? And she opened it up, and sure enough, it was not, appropriate for a 10-year-old kid or 13-year-old kid at the time. She's like, oh my God, well, should she look for that? I said, no, they don't have to look for anything. It's just what comes up. And so that's the other thing. It's just, I feel sorry for parents these days. I don't know how I would deal with it, because there's so much information and it's so over-sexualized. And so, the comparative, the dopamine effect of the likes and all that, and how kids just can filter themselves. And it's just scary. It's very scary. But again, I think there's a positive and there's a negative. And I think parents do need to be very, very careful. I mean, we need to be careful. I mean, even on TikTok, my friends are like, oh, well, that's owned by that. I said, well, yeah, I do. But I just, I have to stay positive, but you also have to just be careful about who you engage with, how you engage, and just, take the precautions. So.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a difference, right? But you can be positive and you can also be responsible at the same time. And that's like what I'm really trying to talk to people about. It's like we can still be online.
Right.
Online has amazing things it's afforded us. These technologies and being able to like order rides to go to the airport, food to my house, the guy to help me with my banister because it wasn't working. Like these are all amazing modern day conveniences that we've all just kind of accepted and are using in our lives, which is great. But what we haven't done a good enough job is demanding and mandating that we keep ourselves safe while doing it.
Exactly.
And I think that stories like what you're talking about and like just being vulnerable with your experiences and like there are scammers out there, it just really helps shed light that this is a larger problem than I think people are thinking that it is.
Right.
And when you hear the number 20 trillion, I mean, that really stops you in your tracks.
It does. That's fascinating. I have to look that up because that's a big number.
It's a big number, and it's only going to get worse, right? So yeah, it's just I've got an uphill battle for sure, but I'm just chipping away as best as I can, one step at a time.
Yeah, I think just getting people's perspectives too, that's really important in the creation of the final product, and how you move forward with it, because I'm sure it'll just continually be enhanced and changed as you figure things out and hear more about different types of situations, because it's probably a morphing sort of reality with all of it. So.
Well, I love your perspective. You've been on the apps for years and years. You're now entrenched in TikTok and understand the social media world. Do you have any best practices or tips to avoid being scammed? Or what are you doing to make sure that you're not a victim of that?
Well, I honestly am not on any apps. I haven't been in a while. Other than, like I said, I just got on the Facebook dating. I probably have been off for probably 5 years, honestly.
Okay.
I just don't have the energy. I'd rather hang out with my horses. I hate to say that, but it's like, oh, I can't deal with it. I just can't deal with it. But with regard to safety, I swear, one of my other posts on TikTok was, I have 5 Jason Momoas that have tried to contact me, so it's basically you can really start spotting, the fake sort of requests and comments and things like that. But it takes, a lot, like I said, a lot of people are just wanting connection and they're like, oh my God, Jason Momoa is contacting me. Oh my God, so they fall for it because they're older and they don't know. And I think that's another concept you might want to take into consideration with your new developments is older people. Like I in high school, we started having computers, I mean, I went to Columbine High School back when Jesus walked the earth, but, we had typing class, and then we started getting the little computers and things like that. But what the problem I think is that a lot of older people have no concept of what's real and what's not. And even with regard to someone who tries to contact you, and that's who they prey upon. I mean, even with the banking and the phishing emails and all that stuff, my mom used to fall for them because, my bank just sent me this email. I have to log in here to show them, I'm like, Mom, hover over the email. But so I think that's something that is definitely a fact, is that it's older generations of people, perhaps the people that did not have social media or the internet in the very, in their lives until very late in their life. And that's the sad part. That's the sad part. But I do think I keep safe by, I just pay attention, and I do watch and I read a lot of articles about, what's going on and how they're trying to get people and things like that. So you just have to be aware. You have to educate yourself.
Totally. Be vigilant.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to lead with one last closing question. After all the wild stories, all the poems, and all the lessons life has handed you, what does safe love look like to you now?
Safe love. Oh, my goodness. I think at my stage in my life, it's the last chapter of my book, and it basically says, you have to be willing to find somebody who will walk alongside you with your big wagon of baggage while their wagon of baggage is right next to you and you're just kind of going together, and I think that's it. It's like a safe place where you understand at this time in our lives, we've been through a lot. And that's what I always say on TikTok too, is if you've made it this far, we have been through so many things, and now we're dealing with later life things. But I think that's what safe love looks like to me, just somebody who's willing to understand my baggage, and I understand his baggage, and we can kind of unpack it together. That's what it looks like to me. So
I love that. I have a visual on the Oregon Trail with my partner going through a really rigorous terrain. Yeah, exactly. We've got our horses and our tin cups of water or whatever.
The wheel fell off the wagon. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, you're right. It's at this point in our life, if you can't accept somebody with the stuff that they're bringing and vice versa, how do you even move forward? So I love that so much. Okay, Catherine, this has been amazing. I want to encourage all my Just Lookin' Out listeners to find you on TikTok.
Yes.
So where can they find you?
So my website is catherineberra.com with a C, Catherine Berra, Berra. And then my TikTok is Catherine with a C, R, author.
And remind us one more time, what is the name of your book?
My book is These Stories Are True, I Shit You Not, a humorous look at online dating for the unsuspecting older human.
Awesome. And we'll be on the lookout for your upcoming publishes too. I'm excited to get my hands on that.
Yes. That'll be next year.
2026. Ping me when they're coming out so I know.
I will.
All right. Well, until next time, I'm Kaylee Nitchie, and as always, I'm Just Lookin' Out. And I love to hear your comments. Follow me on Instagram at Kaylee Nitchie and let me know what you thought of today's episode. Did you know that you can listen and watch Just Lookin' Out? We just launched our YouTube channel at Just Lookin' Out Podcast. And don't worry if you didn't get all of that. You can find all this info in the episode description, as well as a link to apply to be a guest. The Just Lookin Out podcast and content posted by Safe Her Studios, LLC, and Kaylee Nitchie is presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast or related sites or social media is at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals' diagnosis or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.